The first time I noticed the seam, it didn't look like magic. It looked like a draft in a building that thinks it's modern. This happened last winter when I was staying late at work in a 12-story office with new glass and old smell. It was a Tuesday, not even that late, around 8:40, the kind of quiet where the elevators start sounding like they breathe. I packed up, hit the button, and watched the numbers descend. 12, 10, 8. Then a gentle stop on 6 for the lobby, and the doors slid open on a hallway we don't have. Not the marble lobby. Not the beige waiting area on 2. A cinderblock corridor with buzzing red exit signs and that 2 even lighting rooms get in photographs. Cold air pushed at my ankles like the door of a freezer. I half-stepped out, palm blocking the doors, and told myself it was construction nobody emailed about. A sensor clicked. One light woke, then another. A little ripple toward a turn I couldn't see. Somewhere, like someone dragging a roll of paper, there was the slow scrape of something soft across concrete. I said hello because if you're going to talk to the strange, you want it to be a janitor. Nothing answered except a small metallic tap, card against frame soft. I pressed L for lobby again. The elevator thought about it. That's really the only way to describe the pause. Then it closed, dropped to floor, and opened to the life I know. Reception in a sweater, a security guard reading last year's magazine, a plant trying so hard to be alive under yellow light. I asked if facilities were doing work below the lobby. He blinked at me like I had tracked in something on my shoes. "We don't have a below the lobby," he said, and showed me the laminated list of floors like you'd show a confused tourist. 12 lines. 12. He looked at his monitor and said he just watched me come out of the elevator right where I was standing, and then, weirdly, again 2 minutes earlier, the timestamps arguing with the camera like 2 people telling a story over each other. I rode back up to my floor for my scarf and took the stairs down because I didn't trust doors that behave like they're thinking. On the landing between 7 and 6 there was a cool patch of wall that smelled like toner and dust, the copy room smell we tore out during the remodel. When I pressed my ear to it, a low electric buzz pressed back. Not loud, just the kind of hum machinery makes when it knows it exists. I laughed at myself and kept walking. On the sidewalk, I told my breathing it had overreacted. The building looked ordinary from the street. 12 lines of windows, a delivery van double-parked, a sleepy guard, and I took a picture anyway. At home, I kept opening the photo and telling myself a story that would let me sleep. The windows line up. They do. But half a floor below the lobby there's a faint gray band, like stone polished by hands that never stood on our steps. I zoomed until the pixels gave up. My phone tried to repair the noise and drew a ruler straight line right where the blur should have been. In the morning, the guard shrugged. "Truck's idle there," he said, then frowned at his log and asked me why I badged through at 8:41 and again at 8:42 when the footage had me in the same place both times. I told him I didn't know. He laughed a little without smiling, as if the joke happened to him. Around lunch, I used the stairs again because superstition feels like cardio if you're honest about it. Between 7 and 6, that same cold lived in the wall like a breath. My watch, one of those cheap ones that taps your wrist when you've done something the watch likes. Buzzed 3 times, paused, then buzzed 3 again. The screen lit with elevator arrived. I hadn't called one. Through the wire glass, the middle car's doors were open to darkness. Beyond that darkness, like a picture held to a lens, the cinderblock corridor waited. A shape crossed the frame without dropping a shadow in the lobby. It didn't look at me. I stepped toward the handle, and the image snapped back to chrome and tile like the TV had flicked channels. I told myself I was hungry and left for soup. A delivery cart clattered by and a box skidded to my shoe. The label had our company name with the old logo we retired 3 years ago. Below it, records, B6. The delivery guy said thanks and pushed on, and for a heartbeat the street felt a half-inch to the left, like a picture rehung slightly wrong. I could turn that into metaphor if I needed to. It's easier that way. But when the building pretends not to have a basement and packages arrive labeled for it, you start treating metaphors like maps. A week later, on a Sunday that wanted to be boring, my phone made a joke I didn't laugh at. I was chopping peppers into responsible squares, a baseball game streaming on mute, when my mom called. We did the ordinary dance. Neighbor's puppy, some casserole I would never make right. While we were talking, Another call rang through from Mom. My mom on the phone calling me. The card slid up over her own name. She swore she wasn't dialing. It rang out, then dropped a voicemail. The timestamp said tomorrow, 1:12 p.m. I put her on hold and hit play because that's what you do when a clock tells you a story out of order. My own voice came through, tinny like I was speaking into a metal cup. Pick up the yellow folder before you leave. Do not forget. I came back to Mom and asked her to say something weird so I'd know what belonged to which reality. Stop drinking coffee after 5. She scolded on cue, which helped exactly enough. On my counter, under a grocery flyer I hadn't read, sat a manila folder I didn't remember placing there. Empty but for a post-it in my own hand. For Monday. It made no sense and felt worse because it almost did. At 5:56 my landlord texted that water would be shut off Monday unless I dropped a signed form at his Main Street office by noon. I grabbed my bag, put the empty folder inside because theater felt like insurance, and drove. At the window, the receptionist asked for the yellow folder before I spoke. You just made noon, she said, stamping something I hadn't seen, and slid it into a slot under a sign that read Monday forms. Yellow only. Outside, I checked my phone again and the voicemail no longer said tomorrow. It said today, 1:12 p.m., as if the future it borrowed had been returned when I stopped needing it. I don't have a neat moral for that one except this. Sometimes what saves you is not an explanation, just the right prop at the right time. And sometimes the right prop arrives before the reason does. After the folder, I started paying attention the way you do after a near miss on the freeway. Not paranoid, just tuned to edges. In the grocery store on a Wednesday, I walked the cereal aisle twice without moving my feet more than 10 steps. It sounds like exaggeration, so here's the tight version. I passed a woman in a blue coat comparing two brands. I turned my cart around because I'd forgotten salt. The overhead speaker clicked and a man said clean up on 5 in a voice I've heard since childhood. I rolled forward and the woman in the blue coat passed me again holding the same two boxes, frowning in the same place. The floor hummed under the wheels like an old refrigerator. I checked the sign and it still said aisle 5. I looked back and the end cap had traded coffee for paper towels. I took out my phone to prove I wasn't inventing a mood. Video makes liars or witnesses. I hit record and pushed forward a few feet, then stopped to frame the blue coat and the paper towels. The video shows me stop and lift the phone, and then one frame later shows the cart 2 aisles over with my hand on it. There's no cut. There's just a jump like the world remembered a different take. People ask if I was dizzy. I wasn't. I was embarrassed, the way you are when the floor trips you for the first time like a joke you didn't understand. I left the cart and walked outside without buying salt. On the sidewalk, my call history showed a missed call from my own number at the exact minute the frame skipped. The road does it too, but the road is better at keeping a straight face. On the way to my sister's, the mile marker for 43 showed up twice in 6 minutes on a flat stretch where numbers should behave. The radio replayed an ad with a typo you could hear, the voice sang Wednesday with too many S's, then said it again 3 songs later with the error shaved smooth. My GPS told me to make a slight right into a cornfield that hasn't been a road since the 80s. I slowed at a 4-way and watched my car, my color, my dented bumper, cross ahead of me with a man inside who had my jaw but a haircut I regret from 2017. He didn't look over. The light changed and so did the feeling in my hands, like I'd picked up someone else's gloves and pretended they were mine. It's tempting to stack these into a story that says I was chosen or hunted or lucky. The human brain hates loose change. What I can say is that the seams show up more when I'm tired, when the world around me has fewer witnesses, and when I behave as if I expect to be corrected. A Thursday night with snow in the forecast, I went back to the office because I had left a badge in my desk. The guard was new and kind, and I didn't tell him anything except the floor number. The elevator rode smooth as apology until 6, where it softened like a hand on a doorknob that isn't there. The doors opened onto chrome and tile, and for a heartbeat, over that, the cinderblock corridor waited like a photo held just too close to the glass. I brought the yellow folder because props have worked before, and I told myself it was theater for the nerves. I stepped out and the temperature ducked without a draft. The hum lived under everything like a giant refrigerator 3 rooms away. The corridor bent left, then right, then pressed into a door with a metal placard that read B6 in a font our building hasn't used since the remodel. I knocked because I wanted it to be a records room that would embarrass my fear. 3 soft taps came back from a hand exactly my size. I tried the handle. It moved like it belonged to my wrist. Inside, the air smelled like paper and old printer ribbon. Rows of boxes sat labeled with our company name and dates that have not arrived yet. I didn't step fully in. I have learned to treat curiosity like a flame in a room with gas. I set the yellow folder on the threshold and said I was returning something that belonged there. A draft moved the papers inside their boxes without touching the folder. At the end of the nearest row, someone turned the corner. Not a shadow. Not a dream. Me wearing the coat I had on, carrying a yellow folder with a coffee ring I didn't have yet. I looked at me as if at a coworker you almost recognize in another city. She lifted the folder and said, in my voice but tired, "Do not forget," the exact cadence from the voicemail, and placed the folder on the same threshold from the other side. The coffee ring shone, wet. I wanted to ask questions the way you want to throw a window open during a fire. All that came out was, "Is it safe?" She didn't smile, which I respected. She glanced past me toward where the elevator waited, as if listening to its decisions. "Watch to the end," she said, almost kind. It sounded like advice and like a warning about the kind of person I am. A light down the row flickered and held. Between us, on the line where concrete met tile, the yellow folders touched corners like a handshake you could ruin by meaning too much. I slid mine forward an inch. She slid hers back the same inch. The clock on my phone jumped from 8:19 to 8:21 with no in-between, like a cut none of us admitted to making. I stepped back, shut the door, and let the elevator decide for me that night.